My name is Steve Fender. I'm from Fender's Fish Hatchery. We're located here in Ohio. We've done several videos on pond management, pond stocking with fish, vegetation control, and this is our fourth video, and this has got to do a little bit with who you're dealing with when you come to Fender's Fish Hatchery. The reason I'm standing here at this location with the log house behind me is this is where it all kind of began. My dad, Dennis Fender, was born here in 1929 and grew up, and you can't see it, but in front of me there's a little creek that runs down through here called the Milk Creek. And Dad would go down there and play around the creek, catch minnows and chubs and crayfish, bring them up here, and my grandma would have a tub he could put them in, and they would experiment, check things out, and talk about this kind of stuff. And that's kind of where this all began. And then eventually he, of course, grew up and went to the service and come home and decided he had to have something to do to make a living. And they looked into possibly raising fish. So to make a long story short, this all developed into the business that we have today. So starting in 1956, Mom and Dad started the business officially. And we now span about 200 acres of water. We work out of 3 counties with our farms, and we service pretty much all of Ohio. So that's a little bit about who we are and where we come from. I've been involved with it my entire life. My sister Cheryl's involved in it, my wife, and Cheryl's son and grandson, plus several individuals that are not family related but also work here too. A little bit about the people we deal with for the fish. We raise our bass and bluegill, shellcracker, perch, and crappie. We also buy hybrid bluegill, catfish, the grass carp or white aimer, pike, muskie, and walleye, and feeder minnows. The individuals we deal with. We have one company we've dealt with on trout since I was born. Dad started dealing with them in 1965. And then the grass carp come from a farm in Arkansas we started dealing with in 1987. The reason we like to deal with the same individuals is this way we're assured of quality fish when we get them in. We raise as much as we can in order to keep the cost down where it makes it more affordable for you to stock your pond. And then of course dealing with these other individuals, we're able to control price a little bit and also make sure, like I said earlier, we have quality fish when you come into the fish farm. So that's a little bit about who you deal with when you come up to the farm. Now there's several ways you can get fish from us. One way is you can come right here to the hatchery and pick up the fish. We furnish the containers and we package them up and put oxygen with them and guarantee live delivery wherever you're running in the state of Ohio. The other option is we do have tanker trucks that are specially designed to we can deliver right to your pond. So those are a couple of ways you can get fish from us. Several things we want to talk about on the video also. Whenever I do pond clinics, I do a lot of pond clinics in the different counties in the state of Ohio and also for private individuals who do consultation. But one of our major issues we deal with here is vegetation. One of the vegetations we deal with quite often is a real problem is duckweed and watermeal. Duckweed looks like a little 2-leaf clover about 1/8 inch in size, has a little 1/2 inch root that hangs off the bottom of it, and watermeal looks like green grit, real fine sandy looking vegetation. These two vegetations grow by reproducing and splitting off and forming a new plant every 24 to 48 hours. So they spread very quickly in a small body of water. They'll spread over the whole body of the water very quickly, and in some instances they'll block the sunlight off from the underlying vegetation, causing a die off that vegetation and in turn causing a fish kill. And this typically happens in your hotter months in the summer. So the way to control this kind of stuff, like I said, new ponds grow vegetation, old ponds grow it much better. The difference between the two is as your pond matures, it builds up a lot of black muck in the bottom of the pond. This black muck comes from fish manure, dead fish, duck manure, goose manure, vegetation growing and dying. All this builds up over time, making a very thick layer of black muck in the bottom of your pond. So as your fertility rates raise up, it gets to the point where it can support these problem vegetations like your duckweed and watermeal, and also heavy algae blooms that gives your water that dark color, or even the blue-green color like some of these your heavy algae blooms become. So the way to control this, for vegetation as far as root end vegetation, your floating algae and even cattails, we highly recommend the white aimer or grass carp. This is a fish that we get out of Arkansas. They're all sterile females. They cannot reproduce, so you put in what you want. If you put in a 8 of them in an acre of water, you'll never have more than 8 of them guaranteed. Now the way they work is they feed on vegetation, of course. We start off with a fish that's about 11 to 12 inches in size. In one summer's time, they'll double that length and grow up to close to 5 pounds the first summer. Second summer, you're looking at 10-pounder, and third summer, they're 15 pounds. They will grow up to sizes of excess of 40 to 50 pounds, 40 to 50 inches in size. Now, they eat vegetation. They don't disturb the other fish. You don't eat fish eggs or little fish or anything like that. So they are very good at controlling the vegetation. It's all about numbers also and giving them time. You have to give them time to get large enough. It takes you a couple years till they're large enough to do the job. And also you have to have enough numbers. We figure anywhere from 8 to 12 per surface acre. Every pond's different. I've seen some where 5 to the acre would do it, and I've also seen some where you needed 25 to the acre. So an 8 to 12 per acre is a good average number to start off with. That way you don't have too many, and it's a good possibility that will take care of it. Now, there's a little bit of a myth concerned with Aemers. A lot of times I'll have people ask me, say, well, when they get old, should I take them out? I've been told they don't eat vegetation anymore. Aemers will eat vegetation until the time they die. So my answer to that is when they're dead, you take them out. Before that, leave them in because they're still doing a good job of controlling your vegetation. Now, a lot of what happens to cause people to think this is, say for instance, an individual puts 10 of them in an acre of water, and they start doing a good job after about 2 to 3 years, you know, and 15 years down the road, they notice vegetation is starting to become a little bit of an issue again. What they may not have noticed is they may have had 1 or 2 Aemers die off, which will upset the balance enough to where the vegetation can become a trouble. And then the other issue that you run into is if you're not doing anything to control the fertility, your fertility is building up, the vegetation is growing much more prolifically than it did maybe 10 years prior or 15 years prior to that. So it isn't that they've quit eating the vegetation, it's the fact that you need to add more Aemers to the mix that have maybe possibly died off, or I definitely recommend using bottom aeration to aerate the water, help knock the nutrient load down, and also use bacterias. We sell bacterias here that you pour in the water. The bacteria goes down into that black muck and digests it and turns it back into clean water. Essentially what you're doing with aeration and bacteria is you're treating your pond like you would a septic tank. You have a septic tank, has solid waste in it, you use bacteria and sometimes aeration to break that solid waste down to clean it back into clean water where you can put it back into the water system, into the creeks and rivers again, or into leach beds. So using bacteria, using a white Aemer for control of vegetation, those are two very important tools. And then the other tool we like to use, like I mentioned, bottom aeration. We have two different types of aeration. You have surface aeration, which is essentially a fountain of sorts that blows water up in the air. And then you have bottom aeration, which is an air pump of some sorts. It's pushing air through an air line down into the air stone that you position down in the bottom of the pond. And as these bubbles come to the surface, they create a current. So in the summertime, when you have a stagnant layer of water down there in a normal situation, your water gets really warm on the surface and it stays cold in the bottom, so it'll build a layer of water that will not move all summer long. And that'll cause a problem too, because come into the summer, a lot of times, if we have a pretty abrupt change in the temperature, the water on the surface will cool off, releasing that water to the surface, and if there's a lot of junk gases and just bad dead water trapped down there, it'll come up and get mixed with the good water and possibly cause a fish kill. Now, if you're having a bottom aeration down in the bottom that's turning this pond over very gently throughout the course of the whole year, you prevent that stagnant layer of water from even forming. So it doesn't have that opportunity to break away, come to the surface, and cause that potential fish kill in the summertime. And also with those bubbles coming to the surface, they're picking up a lot of gases and such, bringing them to the surface, release them into the air. So that's getting rid of the junk that's in your water. So you're agitating the water, letting the pond breathe, getting rid of your decaying plant matter gases, methane gases, and what have you, that are promoting the growth of your vegetation. So what we're doing is we're preventing a potential domino effect of fertility building up, growing your problem vegetations, and possibly even building up to the point where your algae blooms get too dense, grow too quickly, and possibly die too quickly, taking the oxygen out of the water and then killing fish. I'll touch a little bit on that also. In August, when our water temperatures are particularly high, your oxygen levels go down because cold water carries a higher level of oxygen, so when it gets hot, your oxygen level drops. The next problem we run into is these algae blooms that give your water color will get to growing too densely, and if they die too quickly, the decaying process that plants go through when they die requires oxygen. So what a little bit of oxygen you have in the pond may be stripped out of the pond literally overnight. 24 hours, your oxygen is gone, you have dead fish. So here again, by using bottom aeration to keep your nutrient level down, keeping that stagnant water from building up, using the bacteria to break down that nutrient load that's potentially growing that heavy algae bloom, and then of course using the aimers to control your vegetation are ways to keep your pond healthy, clean, and alive for a lot of years. So these are things you can look into doing. Now also with the white aimer, I know a lot of people contact me from out of state. The state of Ohio has had the white aimers legalized since 1987. If you live in another state other than Ohio, then you want to check with your Department of Natural Resources officers or look online and see if they are legal in your state. If you're not legal in your state, then you have to resort to just using the bacteria and aeration and possibly using some chemicals also. And some individuals will even use pond dyes, and pond dyes are food grade dyes that you pour in the water. And these dyes, if you put them heavy enough, they'll block the sunlight from the vegetation, retarding the growth of your vegetation, and that's another tool you can use to help hold that vegetation back. Now the downside of the dyes is if you have a lot of water movement through your pond, it'll dilute it out very quickly and sometimes not be in there long enough to even be effective. And then with the dyes, you want to be careful. Put them in before the vegetation gets to growing too quickly, because if you wait and you do it after the vegetation is very heavy and you dump in too much dye, you can in fact kill the vegetation by taking the light away from it and then cause a summertime fish kill too. So these things you want to watch, and realistically your best bet before you step in too far to this stuff, contact somebody like myself or another pond expert that can guide you along the right road so you don't end up with a fish kill killing all your fish. So these are some things that I've had customers ask me about: the aeration, using the white aimers. These are all good tools that you can use. Anytime you have any questions about that kind of stuff, our products, if you go to our website, just Google Fender's Fish Hatchery, go to www.fendersfishhatchery.com, you can find all this kind of information. We also sell a book that covers a lot of this information, a book that I wrote a number of years ago that covers a lot of these different aspects for the pond. Also gives you a lot of good pond identification, fish identification, weed identification, and just there's a whole mass of information there. It'll be very helpful for anybody that has a pond. So, and here again, if you go to our website, you'll find my email, my cell number. Call me anytime. I'd be glad to help you out.